when we're trying to understand multicollinearity. Here's an example that helps. Let's imagine that instead of dealing with variables, we're dealing with people. And the reason this is a good analogy is because people have these complex interactions. Some people are bullies or cowboys or nerds or loners, and they interact with each other and with whatever the project is. In this case, let's pretend there's some term paper, and here's the 6 people that are going to work. We have Adam, Betty, Carl, Debbie, Evan, and Fiona, because I couldn't think of a girl's name that starts with that. All 6 of these people are working together to do a term project like a group project. And so the p-value now represents how much each person contributed to the paper. And so Adam, with a very small p-value, he definitely was a significant contributor. He did a lot of the work. So did Betty. Carl, not so much. Debbie did a good bit of work. Evan, not so much, and Fiona, not so much. So our goal here isn't just to give everybody an A or even to assign grades. We just want a model that is as small as possible, because then it's easy to explain to the client. Here's the variables that worked on your term project. So in this case, we're going to take out Evan. I just realized Evan is the name of my brother-in-law. Evan, if for some reason you ever watched this video, I'm sorry, it's nothing personal, but we're kicking you off the project. With Evan gone, now the amount of work everybody does shifts. Fiona did a little bit more work. Not a lot though. Debbie was doing a lot of work. She was like, if Evan's gone, I'm not going to work that hard. So clearly she was influenced by Evan. Did I mention he's my brother-in-law? That means he's married to my sister. Debbie, you need to deal with this. But Carl, on the other hand, did exactly the same amount of work. Clearly, the piece that Evan was doing before really wasn't related to what Carl was doing. Betty, though, definitely stepped up her game. She did whatever the small piece was that Evan did before we kicked him off the team. So what's Debbie's problem? Well, Betty now is taking care of a lot of that random variability, and so Debbie didn't have to work as hard because Betty stepped up the game. We still don't have a model as small as what we want, because we're going to use 0.05 as our cutoff. So who would we kick off the team next? Well, if we were just looking at the p-value, it'd be Fiona. So we kick her off the team, and Adam and Betty, their p-values stay the same. They're doing the same amount of work. The ability of those variables to predict the y value, which in this case is our term paper, hasn't really been affected whether Fiona is part of the model or not. Carl, on the other hand, suddenly did a bunch of work. Where did that extra work come from? Well, Fiona was doing some. Her p-value wasn't 1. It just wasn't low enough to be 0.05. So without Fiona in the model, Carl now has to do a lot more work. And Debbie, her p-value instead of dropping has actually gone up. She says, fine, if Evan's not in the model and Fiona's not in the model, I'm done. I'm not going to work anymore. Well, what really is happening is Betty and Carl have picked up the variability in here. And so suddenly it's obvious we don't really need Debbie, who seems to have a thing for my brother-in-law anyway. So you're off the team. And now we just have Adam, Betty, and Carl. They all have very small p-values. And without these other 3 people, we've simplified how many people are working on this term project. As a statistician, that's good. You only have to explain how these 3 variables affect the y variable. You will have to mention that Debbie, Evan, and Fiona were kicked off the team because they didn't work hard enough. You don't want the client to think you forgot about them. But if you were to try to guess from the beginning who would be the people, you would have thought Adam and Betty, sure, but you also would have said Debbie and not Carl, and that wasn't the way it was once we walked through it. So you have to go and delete variables one by one and then redo the model and look at it and take the next step. And you'll hear me use some of this language about which variable is working hardest, because I think that's a good way to understand why the p-values can jump around. In the next video, let's see an example.